Welcome, everyone. This is a third in a series, Nearform webinars on cross-platform development. Super excited that everyone's here joining us, or if you're watching this on YouTube, super happy that you're here. Thanks for being here. Just a reminder, the first in the series, we talked, about the reasons that enterprises might want to look into doing cross-platform development, whether, that's doing actual cross-platform or consistent experience, how you organize your teams. The second in the series was about, what approach can the enterprises take when doing cross-platform development. So talking about your existing architectures and your commitment to legacy systems and legacy code, and how your existing organization is structured. And here we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty and start talking about actually doing some cross-platform development. If you missed any of the other webinars, go check out the Nearform YouTube channel, and you can find all those webinars to give you some context. So thanks again for being here. If you do have questions, feel free to submit them directly into the question panel here in Zoom, and we'll try to sort through those. And if we have time at the end, we'll get to them. So let's get started. Let's do a little intro. We'll go around the table here and introduce everyone. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Cody Zuschlag. I'm a developer relations engineer at Nearform. I love everything about tech. I love developing. I love sharing tech. I love finding interesting solutions to problems and sharing that knowledge. I'm also an instructor at the local university where I live in France. Super happy to be here. Super happy to be emceeing this event, and with these really incredible, talented people. Looking forward to this discussion. So, Matt, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Cody. So my name is Matt McComb. I am the head of solutions for Nearform in the EMEA region. It's nice to be called talented by Cody. I guess I'm talented, but I also have been doing mobile development now for over a decade. So that started by building out lots of native iOS apps. When the App Store was first released, built a couple of hobby apps, and then that progressed up through starting to build mobile apps for small businesses, and then into the enterprise. And then over the past probably 4 or 5 years, becoming a lot more focused on cross-platform in general, and applying it to larger businesses. And yeah, I guess that's why I'm here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Andy, you're next on my Zoom screen, so I'm just going to go around the table as if we were at a table. Tell us a little bit about you.
Great. Yeah, so my name's Andy. I'm a technical director here at Nearform. Yeah, been doing software development and architecture for over 10 years now. Similar to Matt, kind of started out as a hobby when I was at school, and then over the years progressed into a load of experience with different enterprise companies. I'm currently leading a fairly big initiative with one of our clients on a cross-platform journey. So hoping to bring some experience to them.
Awesome. Well, that leaves Jake. Tell us about you.
Hey everyone, I'm Jake, technical director as well at Nearform. I've been in tech doing software engineering and architecture for around 10 years as well. Spent a large part of my career working for a large broadcaster here in the UK, transitioning a lot of their proprietary native apps across to universal cross-platform sort of technologies. So, huge advocate of clean, scalable architectures and, open code standards and things like that.
Awesome, Jake. Thanks for that. I guess I can throw out there too. I've been doing dev work for maybe 15 years, and last year at Nearform, we finished a project with a large multinational telecom where we built, a cross-platform, cross-channel design system, which was actually a really cool project. So got a little context to bring to the discussion too with that. Let's just get started and start jumping into some of the topics that we want to talk about today. And the first topic, if we're going to start building our cross-platform journey, is kind of the technology comparison, because I know at Nearform we have just some really incredible React Native experience and power behind React Native, but it's not the only technology. So I'm just kind of curious about some of the other technologies, if we wanted to compare some things. For instance, Flutter. I hear a lot of buzz about Flutter. Matt, I'll start with you. Do you have something to say about the difference between how you choose a technology?
Yeah, I guess like this is where you can fall into many traps because engineers are very precious about tools and frameworks and highly opinionated people in general. I mean, I guess from my experience, I would probably say that the biggest challenge is not necessarily picking the right framework, it's using the framework and platform correctly. There's many bad ways to build a native app in the same way there is many bad ways to build a cross-platform app. I mean, I've been using cross-platform. The first framework I used was Xamarin. And Xamarin, this was probably 7 years ago when Xamarin was relatively immature. A lot of people who adopted Xamarin at that point tried to use Xamarin forums to get like a cross-platform user experience. But that really didn't create an app that looked and felt in any way native and was a very substandard experience. And actually then when you tried to make anything native, you had to then build in an integration layer, which was very awkward and cumbersome to do. So I think the correct approach with Xamarin at that point was not to use forums, but people felt that that wouldn't give you as much reuse. But the truth of the matter was you could still build a native UI using the native tools and integrate it with Xamarin, and you still got, 30-40% reuse. So I think for me, it's not really a debate necessarily about the tool. It's more about having the right experience and time to learn to use the tool properly or the right partner to help you do it. We obviously use React Native because we have an extensive development team with JavaScript, TypeScript, React experience. So it comes quite naturally to us. But I think you can fall down into the pit of debating platform and the various different nuances of it, rather than just starting to try it out and starting to learn how to do it properly. It's my opinion.
Yeah, I think we obviously went through a little bit of this when we kicked off the current engagement I'm on around, do we use React Native? Do we use Flutter? They seem to be the two kind of pioneers of the industry right now. And obviously Flutter is very new and upcoming. And yeah, like we tried to do a very objective analysis of both of those platforms, and really they're apples for apples. Like they both do very similar things. They set out to achieve very similar things. And actually, I think there were minor pros and cons, but actually if anybody came to the table and said one was extensively better than the other, then they'd probably be lying, right? It'd be biased. So I think, as Matt says, the reality is there are various options out there now that you can explore. I think from our point of view, obviously, as Matt says, there is a little bit of a bias from us because guess what? I guess probably not bias, but we can bring you the best value because we understand React and React Native and stuff like that. And I suppose one of the other key things for us was, as is always the case, but hiring into the ecosystem that you choose, right? You can choose the new spangly tool, but then you have those hiring considerations, and whether or not you kind of fall down the trap of, do you want a team that's only capable of writing front end, or do you want to try and promote full stack teams and stuff? And I guess our mantra is that we try to, leverage the JavaScript ecosystem so that we can have full stack and stuff. So that swayed our decision a little bit. But I think, as Matt says, that doesn't discount Flutter. It's a very capable tool, and there are others out there that are just as capable now. So.
Yeah, I think just to put a finer point on that, I would actually say I think technical limitations and technical sort of criteria probably isn't the biggest driving factor these days, right, to picking a cross-platform framework. It's more about the team and the hiring market that you have around you, right, to be able to move quickly.
Yeah, I love that. I love that point that, the question, like I framed the question in the wrong sense, right? It's really what's best for your enterprise and for your team, right? And there's something to be said about if you already have React experience, maybe that transition in React Native is going to be something that your teams are going to be more comfortable with. I mean, that's an open question, but I think that's generally why we go the React Native route, because we do have all that React and React Native experience. So one of the things I think that we've kind of bubbled up from the previous webinars is that architecture is the key to success, right? If you're going to build a cross-platform app of some sort, that investing in the right architecture from the beginning is going to be key to that success. So given that, like, how do we capitalize on cross-platform when we're thinking about architecture? I don't know. I'll start this one off with Andy if you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a tricky question, right? I know that certainly again, I'm going to during this webinar probably reference the current engagement we're on a bit, but yeah, like the architecture, I guess, goes back to when you set out on this mission, kind of really very clearly defining your goals and what your outcome really is. It very well may be that you're a smaller business and actually your real estate is small, and so you're going to build one app, and actually, you might resource that app with, a limited number of people, and that's fine. And then, the vast other end of the scale is that you're a massive enterprise company who has, tens of thousands of employees. And I think you have to then go into this kind of initiative a little bit more open-minded. And certainly from our perspective, we try to architect this in a way that keeps it, very flexible. And we've kind of used a very modular design to allow multiple chefs in the kitchen, if you will. So, if I just take a bank as an example. If you were, say, a bank, and you might have like a department that manages like the credit card experience, and you might have a department that manages the loan experience and stuff. Now, you can't go into that and architect that solution with just like, this is just one mobile app in mind. You kind of need to start thinking broader, that actually what you're doing is you're essentially building maybe 5 apps, and you want to bring them together. So your architecture needs to kind of revolve around that type of, modular ecosystem and stuff. So, and that's, what we've had to do on current engagement. We know there are going to maybe be like 10 teams contributing. And so it presents challenges, as it always does, trying to be modular and flexible and stuff. But yeah, trying to strike the balance there around the architecture of not putting ourselves in a corner and having maybe 100 people contribute to maybe like one Git repo and stuff like that. So
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree with that. I think a lot of this stuff comes back down to the bare bones kind of best practice, clean code, hexagonal architecture, maybe style approaches, right? Where you're putting people at the heart of the thing that you're building and optimizing for that at scale, kind of bringing it back down, I guess, to first principles. How do you scale this so that you can have a set of people collaborating across a shared code base, right? And figuring out, how do you scale that? The hardest bit is going to be the collaboration and the guidelines and the kind of best practices for contributing to the shared repository. And actually, I would probably say that the people bit is probably the hardest bit than actually putting the tools in place to manage the mono repo. That would be my view there, I think.
Yeah, I think as well, like for me, having worked on native apps for a long time, I think the cross-platform tooling is enabling this a lot better than some of the native app tooling is as well. Like for a long time, if you're working on an iOS app and you had nib files or UI files, when multiple people edit them, would just break builds, merge requests would be an absolute nightmare. Whereas now with cross-platform and so the tooling around it, it's kind of made that a lot easier than what you would be able to do. So you can start to build micro front-end architectures inside some of the cross-platform frameworks a lot more easily than you probably could do within native as well, which I think takes this whole thing to another level as well. It starts to raise opportunity for businesses with multiple apps to start to try and share code across different apps rather than just having a debate about, is cross-platform right for the single app? It's no, cross-platform's an enabler to actually help you develop and reuse across the whole estate of apps. I think is where the architectural piece really starts to become very interesting.
Yeah, exactly that. And you kind of touched on, some of the architecture there, the modern day standards. I think probably most people on this call will have heard of design systems and component libraries and things like that, right? And they are just core pieces of that code reuse, that kind of maximum productivity. Don't have your teams build a button 10 times. It's just basic stuff, right? And I think as you're saying, that cross-platform really lends itself into that architecture and that kind of system. So yeah, that's what we've sort of been trying to drive very heavily. And it can be hard, I think, as Jacob says, getting people to not put components in their specific piece of the pie, and trying to change culture is probably the hardest piece. But if you're really kind of committed to that, then we're seeing some really great results out of the back of it.
Yeah, I think maybe the hardest part as well is visualizing like the benefits that you get from being component first, right? Like the commodity aspect of having a shared set of components that adhere to some best practice design guidelines, like that's going to accelerate your delivery no end, right? Comparatively to having 6 different apps with a set of different design standards, right? You know, it's huge.
Yeah, love that. I don't want to get too far out in the technical weeds, but if you're like building a React Native component library, right, you can build a React Native web and distribute that package npm, and then your web devs can consume those components as if they're any other React components. But yeah, I probably shouldn't get too far out in the technical weeds. But that's honest. I love what you all have said about that. And I was also thinking about Conway's Law, and you're talking about, you know, how you organize your code and your architecture based on your organization. So it feels like it always comes back to Conway's Law, and we're, you know, trying to build an architecture and trying to start a big code base and an enterprise, if that's your use case or your case. So I felt like we had a really good transition there to start talking a little bit about tooling. So how does tooling help in this adventure as we're, you know, trying to build some cross-platform applications? Matt, you want to start that one off?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, I don't want to beat on native, but I think the tooling in the native space for a long time kind of dragged behind. I think what we're seeing now within sort of the cross-platform and more mature libraries, especially around React Native, is that the tooling has matured a lot, as well as the frameworks. I guess whenever I think of tooling as well, I think, you know, compared to where native was at and some of the tooling that businesses might have used to build their apps and the processes that put in place maybe 6-7 years ago, I think when you look at cross-platform as a way of either rebuilding your apps or as a way of rethinking them, the maturity in the tooling in the space now has just leaped on so much. It's become much easier to automate builds. It's become much easier to distribute them. Testing has solidified a lot more as well. Like the tooling there has matured massively. It used to be the case that in native, there would be a new testing library every year. It was a completely different way to test. It was sometimes accessibility labels. It was sometimes something else. And automated tests just broke. There was no resiliency around them as well. So I think finding the right set of tools is kind of pivotal to making this successful.
Yeah, I agree with that, Matt. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a mantra that I try to follow here, which is these cross-platform solutions allow you to run really fast. And if you don't deliver in tooling, you will run fast and deliver slow. That's the reality of it, right? Because packaging up applications is a little bit nuanced, and it can be complicated. And having a developer do that manually on their machine and sign packages and push them to the App Store and push them into TestFlight and all of those manner of things that you have to do, is time consuming. You know, you can lose people for, you know, if you look at a sprint and your idea of a sprint is 2 weeks and you want to maybe deliver a dev version of an app 3, 4, 5 times in that sprint, you know, you're losing developers for days, you know, signing apps and doing stuff manually. So I think, yeah, it's a worthy call out to say that, sure, you know, go on this cross-platform journey. It's brilliant. You'll deliver a lot faster. You know, it's a great thing to do. But you have to be prepared to invest heavily up front in the tooling, right? You know, you might even find that your team is sat still for, you know, 2 months whilst they get the tooling right. But the reality of that, however, is thereafter you're delivering painlessly, seamlessly fast. You know, at the minute we're delivering a nightly build of an app to our stakeholders, and it's all automated, right? No one's having to think about it. So every night the master branch gets built, gets delivered onto TestFlight, great. Stakeholders are kept aware, brilliant. And then we have our prod cut, which goes out as often as we want it to. Again, you know, we make the decision around, we want to do a release. All of our automated testing has already run. We've got confidence. And I think that's the other thing, you know, protecting your reputation and your brand and stuff. You know, we're releasing fast with absolute confidence because, you know, our apps have been through all their own testing. They've gone through browser stack. They've had their end-to-end stuff. We've tested it on, you know, real devices in the browser stack device farm and stuff. So yeah, investing in all of that stuff up front really just takes a lot of cognitive load off your team, you know, not having to worry about that stuff and having a really easy Git flow process that just takes care of it. It's sort of mandatory, really.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's really interesting because there's definitely synergies here with the DevOps platform engineering world here as well, isn't it? Particularly when you're operating at scale, right? I mean, Universal Apps is kind of a gateway to being able to, build lots of apps very quickly, consistently, and get really good performance from them. But when you think about this at a platform level, you can really start to kind of eke out way more optimizations to go faster. And ultimately, that's what people want to do, right? They want to innovate quicker, get things to market faster so they can see what sticks.
Yeah, I think that's where the debate is. It's not people for years obsessed about cross-platform versus native, but it's not about that really anymore. It's about cross-platform enabling a platform type approach to mobile so that you can go faster with not one app, but a whole suite of apps. I think that's kind of the next sort of generation of mobile apps for me. That's where the enterprise should be going.
Yeah, I love all that, and touching on the kind of the continuous deployment, continuous integration, all those pieces. Yeah, I think we hit some really important points on the head there. I just want to take a minute to remind everybody who's live watching this. If you do have any questions, please do submit those directly in Zoom. You have the Q&A button at the bottom of the window, and we'll try to get to those. So if you want some more details about any of these topics or want a deep dive into a subject, we'll probably save that for the end, but we'd be more than happy to do that while we have this panel of experts here. I feel like we should take advantage of that. So let's move on to another topic. And I think Matt touched on this in his first response to tooling is, what is a modern approach to cross-platform testing? We're all devs here, right? We've been doing dev work for a long time, and we all write tests, right? We know tests are key to success, to having a maintainable project that we can, on-ramp new people and people can make changes and feel comfortable with the code. So what's a modern approach to cross-platform testing? I'll just open that up to whoever wants to jump in.
Sure. I got, again, a lot of, this is a very current thing for us. I'm actually going to, I guess, maybe not say something controversial, but say something that's worth thinking about. I think that probably as an industry, we often, I think unit testing is like, fine. People know we need unit tests, right? That's a fairly industry standard now. So sure, we've got, unit test coverage, we put it in the pipeline and make sure that it never falls below, 90%. Great, that's just good developer standards. And then obviously you want to go further, you're in the mobile device world and it's fairly predictable in the Apple world and it's entirely unpredictable in the Android world because, the range of hardware is just vast. I think we can fall into a trap of trying to do too much end-to-end testing, right? So we've been having this debate right now with our enterprise customer. Their default is just to have like thousands and thousands and thousands of end-to-end tests. And that's wonderful because they have a lot of confidence and they also churn loads, they're constantly fixing tests and the tests are timing out. And actually the value that they're deriving from those end-to-end tests is not what they think it is. And so actually we've, tried to challenge what they consider the norm there to say, actually, what do those end-to-end tests need to tell you? They don't need to tell you whether the app's saying good afternoon, good evening. We can do that in a unit test that runs in, a nanosecond. You're going in and you're testing that you can access all the parts of the app. You're doing a smoke test to make sure it comes up on that device and it's not crashing. So yeah, look, we've obviously done the two approaches. We've got our end-to-end tests, we've got our unit testing. We're doing a little bit of integration testing more on our APIs. They're all very important things to do. But I'd always challenge that, don't think that you need to have 1,000 end-to-end tests because guess what? They're expensive, they're slow, they're unreliable. That's the reality of them. You do need them. And obviously we're leveraging, right now, we're just leveraging Cucumber and Appium to basically run in real devices in browser stack and stuff like that. Great, that's great for us. We can kind of go and set up a nice list of devices that we want our app to absolutely run on, and we know that it's going to run consistently and we've not got load time issues and other kind of nuancy things. So they are important, but yeah, I always kind of challenge the focus on your unit tests, focus on your functionality, and then figure out what your critical paths are for your end-to-end tests. Don't go and build 1,000 of them so that you need 10 engineers constantly fixing them. Go and build 50, go and build 100, go and test that your app comes up, that you can go to your deep links, you can reach all the corners of your app and stuff like that. But just keep it very, very critical path.
Yeah, I guess
Go on, Matt.
I guess to add to that, like once you have that automation in place, I think it's pretty cool to think about the additional types of testing you can do now. Like Nearform, we have a couple of specialists in accessibility. We have testers that focus on automate or on performance testing and things like that as well. And I think for a long time, because of the tooling and the issues around some of the tooling, people were happy enough just with automated testing, integration testing, but that should be a standard, and we should be starting to push where we're going with testing. So accessibility, like we would test in the web, should be something that's considered in mobile and should be automated as a first class set of tests that exists within your sort of standard CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah, hit the nail on the head there. That's where I was going to go as well. And even considering, if you do need some kind of like, higher confidence, maybe consider things like visual regression testing and stuff as well, directly in the component library, right? There's other ways you can push for high test coverage without necessarily running the app end to end and going through that really long, laborious process, right?
Yeah, we've just invested fairly heavily in Percy to do the visual regression stuff. And as you say, it gives you like the continuity across devices. This looks the same across 20 devices quite quickly, rather than I'm going to go and press all these buttons and see if they work.
So maybe I have a question that just came out listening to all of you speak. What about testing on actual physical devices? Because I worked on a project once where people said, when you make a PR, you test it on at least one physical device. And when we roll a release, we're going to test it on, whoever rolls a release, they're going to test it on all the different physical devices. Well, one from Android and one from iOS and one for the web. Does automated testing like replace that? Do you feel confident in automated testing frameworks that actually test on actual devices? Or is there still something to be said for devs having those devices on their desk when they're working?
I think there's still value, I think, in having devices, but I think actually a lot of companies practically find it difficult. We are in a remote first culture now all of a sudden. Guess what? When Bob wants the iPhone 14, it's a real hassle. So you're either investing heavily in real devices, and actually, is it a big investment really in the scheme of things? Probably not. Yeah. So you're either going to have to go in, and again, like you can't send 10 devices to every tester you have or every stakeholder, right? So I think for us, strategically, we do have a couple of physical devices, just because actually sometimes having it in hand and having like that actual, feel of that device in your hand and how things are flowing is much more, natural than say trying to do it in a simulator. But other than that, we've invested heavily in BrowserStack. We're using their real device farm, which I think is like a more sustainable, more automated way of doing things. And then strategically, I guess we're lucky, we're in a big enterprise, so we get to roll it out to 100, 200 internal test users before we then cut the release out to public. So we've got, I think there's strategic approaches you can do to kind of say, actually, we're going to get this app onto physical devices before it hits, the public. And obviously Android and even iOS, but Android I think is a little bit better at this. You can do a percentage rollout and stuff, right? So I think actually you're better off. Otherwise, you spend forever not trusting yourself, not believing that you've got the confidence to cut the release. So, you should never actually say, I need somebody to open it on a phone. Like you should never get yourself into that position. If you want to deliver fast, you have to have the confidence.
Love that. It comes back to scalability. I love that. Bring it back to if you want to scale. Great points on that. If there's no other comments on testing, let's talk a little bit about working with existing apps. So I think one of the things I hear from clients at Nearform is, they already have existing apps and they want to, start working towards cross-platform development. So, there's always this question comes up, can we integrate something cross-platform? Maybe that's React Native, maybe that's another technology. Can we integrate that into an existing native app? What are the pros and cons to that? And is this a good strategy, or is this a strategy that's going to cause more pain than it's worth?
Yeah,
go ahead, Matt.
I think the answer to that is as long as it's part of a strategy. Like it's not I mean, in my experience, it's not a good long-term strategy to have the two coexist, because you don't really get the benefit of the cross-platform side of things. The bridge between the two works fine and it works well, but I guess it's not perfect, and it's awkward to work around. So I guess from a wider strategic point of view, the way that I would approach it is start to use like a strangler pattern, where you're taking bits of functionality that are subsumed into cross-platform, but with a view to gradually taking away some of the additional features of the app over time, just replacing the wider native piece, because there's no point really in having both coexist in the same app, I don't believe, because you don't really get the full benefit of having that cross-platform developer experience on the reuse, because it's just partitioned off. Might not be the message that everyone wants to hear, but I do think it has to be part of a strategic move.
I follow up with you, Matt. Obviously, I know Matt and I have had many a conversation around this topic with various clients as well. And yeah, look, we come across, again, big enterprise companies that are risk averse, right? Or frankly, you just can't gamble everything on black, right? And then so actually, we have to approach this brownfield, solution where you kind of migrating slowly to a cross-platform solution. I think, as Matt touched on just there, it's imperfect, right? And what ends up happening is you pay the price of being risk averse by actually slowing the team down. That's the reality of it, right? So what you've done is you've added complexity into your application, which favors neither team. It doesn't favor your cross-platform team, and it doesn't favor your native team, right? And so that can be really hard. And going back to people, it can be really hard to manage from a people perspective. So actually, sure, the ideal scenario is that you throw all the risk in and you go and build it from scratch, and you go greenfield, and you'll deliver a lot faster. The reality, however, is that there are many CDOs and CTOs and CEOs that absolutely won't let you do that. And so actually, we have to approach it in this brownfield way. But I think, as Matt says, going back to the banking example earlier, what you need to do is find logical boundaries where you can actually stop teams having to interact massively with each other, and to sort of say, actually, I'm going to have the loans department go off and build in React Native, and that's my risk averse approach. Is I'm going to segregate it to a small section of the application. And I guess that's sort of what Matt was saying there. Just that's the approach I think you have to take, but you have to be really committed to getting on that journey and getting down the road quickly. If you're committed to cross-platform, you need to commit to an aggressive strategy. Otherwise, what you end up is this hybrid approach where you've got a mismatch of tooling and a mismatch of tech and mismatch of people, and that can be quite laborious for everybody involved. So I think, as Matt said, it's not the perfect answer. I'd love to sit here and go, it's really, really easy, everyone can do it. Don't even worry about it. That's not the reality of it, I think. So I think in our experience, it can be done. There are very well-known walked paths to do it. But you have to be really committed either way.
Or have a really good partner as well, like Nearform.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? I mean, looking for some guidance. To the brownfield, right? So we call this when we're mixing legacy code with new cross-platform technology. This becomes a challenge. Matt, do you have any more, or Jake, do you have any more to add on that topic about brownfield, greenfield, existing legacy apps?
I think my only comment to add was experience the exact same thing. I think the only way you can achieve a really good outcome on this is to have a really good strategy that convinces the business why we are commoditizing. We want to go faster, but actually, in order to go faster, we actually need to bite the bullet here and do a really good, large portion of the app estate and get that moving in the right direction, right? I think doing it piecemeal, it just wouldn't work. And actually, I think what I've seen in the past is efforts to try to do that piecemeal bit, but you end up with the worst of both worlds. You end up with weird abstractions. You end up with really legacy bits of libraries here dotted around, right? It doesn't get maintained. It's even harder to then change, right, and move forward. So yeah.
I love that point. Matt, did you have something to add on that?
No, just agreeing with what Jake said. Once you integrate React Native into your native app, you've suddenly got all of the React Native dependencies, your bundle size goes up by many megs, and it can give people a very bad impression of cross-platform, and then they become naysayers in a way, but they just haven't really seen the benefit of it because they haven't taken the proper approach to it.
Right. I feel like it comes back to that for a lot of things on the projects I've worked on with React Native, is this big hump to get over. It's like a big investment in the beginning. And if you stick through it, if you convince all your stakeholders and everybody's invested in that, getting over that initial investment, like there's this huge return on investment that you can get in the end, right? If you get through that, but you can be right in the middle of that, right? There's huge builds with hundreds of extra megabytes and people are wondering, like, the performance has just been ruined. Like, where are we at? But it's like we're going somewhere good. You just got to hang on so we can get there. Let's move on to another topic. How can we achieve like a native-like user experience when we're using a cross-platform technology? So I'll just open that question up. Who wants to take a stab at that? I'll nominate Jake because I don't think I've nominated you first yet. So here.
Yeah, I think it's actually really interesting, this. And actually, my experience has broadly been not trying to use kind of the system themes and trying to move away into a nice consolidated design system within the organization itself, right? Have we just lost a couple of people there?
Yeah, I know that Matt and Andy were working in the same office, so
I'll carry on. Yeah, I'll carry on. Yeah,
Well,
I think from my perspective, sometimes actually coming up with your own bespoke, consistent theme across the platform of apps, right, can actually be the way where you get to that kind of near native performance, that near native usability from a design perspective, right? And actually coming up with those design tokens, doing your own user research, and occasionally, right, falling back to default native components where possible and trying not to deviate too much from kind of what the user would expect, right, on that mobile platform at that point in time for whatever they're doing, I suppose. And, I think the other side of things as well would maybe be using platform-specific gestures and animations to create that seamless experience, right? It has to feel familiar in the person's hand, right? And again, a lot of this also probably comes down to when you think about like devices, there's a spectrum. You've got your top tier high performing devices, but then you've got your low tier ones, right? I'm thinking about Kindle Fires and things like that, which maybe don't perform as well. So actually making sure you've tested on that kind of spectrum of devices, right? To make sure the thing operates as the user is going to expect it to across the board,
I love that. And I think that's such an important point. And when you're talking about that, it really comes back to the design work, right? And I think I keep leaning on one of the experiences that I had, but the designers, and starting right from the design, you have to start thinking, what is cross-platform and when we want to have a native experience, because there's things that just don't make sense. I remember making a cross-platform component library where the ask was, let's add breadcrumbs. It's like, well, that doesn't really make sense in a mobile app, right? We don't usually see breadcrumbs in a mobile app. So I feel like there's, we got to have that at all levels. So let's think about when we want native, when is that important? It looks like Matt and Andy are back. I know that you're both in the same office, so I assume the internet just went out. We were just talking about how to achieve a native like user experience, and we're doing cross-platform. Andy, do you have any thoughts on that?
So here's hoping the Wi-Fi doesn't cut out. As you say, we're in the same office. I think again, I think Matt and I share a bunch of opinions on this, but I think there needs to be a perception change. I think a lot of people still think that cross-platform means what it used to mean, right? So what cross-platform was, even maybe 5-6 years ago, was that you would use one of the solutions where you basically build a website and package it up as an app, right? And so actually what happened was you ended up with a cross-platform app, which was of questionable user experience. You'd have web date pickers and things, web inputs and stuff that just didn't make sense. That's really not the case anymore, right? You only have to look at some of the frameworks now to say you can see how invested they are in native experience, native GPS, camera, even down to just simple things like date inputs, number inputs, stuff like that. So I think there's two things to do, right? Which is to approach it as you are building a mobile app. You're not packaging up your website, your mobile view website onto a mobile app. That's not what you're doing. And if you are doing that, you need to question the value of having a mobile app. Like, is having a mobile app package version of your mobile website really adding value to your customer? Probably not. So yeah, I think once you get over that kind of old school mindset, which to be fair, that's one, I'd say 6 years ago, maybe that was the case. These days, I think most people know, the designers we meet and stuff, know they're building mobile apps. And yeah, so React Native, Flutter, insert any other framework now, I think you can get really deep into the native experience. And I think that's it. It stems from your design from top right the way down to how you build it. Integrate with the native components. And that's the difference. If you, as I say, if you don't approach it that you're going to use native inputs and Face ID and the camera and things like that, then why are you building a mobile app? So that's the biggest thing, I think, as you say, is, design it as if it were a mobile app, build it as if it were a mobile app. Don't just repackage your website.
And the tooling exists now for this, right? Again, tooling has come on so far since the days of bundling up static websites, right, into, I don't know, PhoneGap or whatever it might have been. Looking at things like Expo, it handles the transitioning, right, between the platforms for you out of the box via a consistent API. That's awesome.
Yep.
Love all that, because right, a progressive web app that exists for a reason, right? Like, we're building a native app, like it should have some sort of native experience to it. Matt, do you have any thoughts on the topic of achieving a native user experience cross-platform?
Nothing much more to add, I guess. Yeah, I guess the other thing I would add is that you don't always have to pander completely to the native platforms as well. I think you can fall down the trap of trying to make things feel like a really tailored iOS app or a really specific sort of look and feel for Android. But a lot of the big players in the space now who are using the likes of React Native are creating kind of a platform agnostic user experience. It still uses native controls and it still has a native experience, but it's kind of agnostic on the visual side of it as well. So you can get a bit more reuse from it too. The likes of Instagram.
I feel like that's such an important point, that there are use cases, and that's some of the great experiences we have at Nearform. We've seen those where sometimes having a consistent user experience, right, is more important than having the most native user experience. So you want to see the same checkout screen at your airline, whether it's on the website or on your telephone, just to come up with an example out of thin air. But yeah, I think that's an important point. You have that balance.
100%, yeah, and you can still conform to the Apple human interface guidelines. You can still conform to Google's guidelines and instructions as well. Just have to always use everything by the book. You can still create some level of your own identity or your own brand within it and your own user interface.
Great points on that. So we have about 15 minutes left. We have at least another topic or two to talk about. I just want to give a little reminder again, in case anyone joined later in the webinar live here on the live stream. If you have questions, do submit them on the Q&A button in Zoom, and we'll try to find time at the end of this, depending on all the topics we get through, to answer as many as we can. I see I already have a question in the queue, so we'll get to that at the end of the webinar. So just a little reminder. So actually, last topic before we get to that Q&A is kind of a hot question, maybe, since we're here talking about cross-platform development. And the question is when not to use cross-platform, or when not to use React Native. What are some use cases when you shouldn't go down that route? I think Andy touched on that a tiny bit. Like, if you're just going to package your your website into a native application so they can download it on the App Store, maybe that's a possible use case. But what are your thoughts on that? Andy, I'll start it off with you, I think, this time.
Sure. Yeah. It's an interesting one. There aren't many things that can't be catered for, I think, in the cross-platform world. But I think where we specifically try to draw a line is when you're going to start getting heavy into the hardware of the device. I think, if you're starting to leverage, you're really starting, your core application is leveraging AR. Your core application is leveraging, it's trying to find examples, like, because the cross-platform, users is compatible with so much now. But if you're doing gaming, right, like trying to package up a game unnatively, not only are you probably going to get suboptimal performance, but you're also then going to be backed into a corner around what you can actually do to optimize it. So I just think there are a couple of use cases where you need to be as close to the hardware as you can be, and you want to start writing native code for that. But certainly for kind of most apps by all accounts that aren't games and aren't kind of AR and those very deep tech things are typically pretty good. But yeah, certainly I think it comes a point where, outside of needing a few native plugins, maybe, you start to question the value of having a cross-platform solution.
Yeah, in general, I would say it's getting the number of apps or the types of apps that you wouldn't build with cross-platform are probably getting fewer and fewer. Even 6-7 years ago, I was building cross-platform Xamarin apps to render multiple CCTV camera feeds using low-level hardware decoders on device, which was coming down from C# and Xamarin into C++ libraries, crossing over native bindings and things. So like the performance was there then, and there was native integrations then. So yeah, I guess as Andy was saying, gaming off the top of my head, but like it genuinely is getting narrower and narrower, that gap where the apps can't be built.
Yeah, Jake, do you have anything to add to that?
Only to really agree with what's already been said. My experience of building cross-platform apps comes broadly from the heavily interactive and sort of gaming side of the world, actually, and it is extremely challenging to do. Not only for performance reasons, because like I was saying before, right, there's a huge spectrum of devices out there. Some have terrible hardware, some have top-notch hardware, right, and optimizing that, it may just end up being way more expensive than if you'd have just gone down the native route initially, right? And it's about weighing that up and making sure that you've got the strategy. But again, it comes back to that strategy piece, doesn't it? Making sure you know why you're making these decisions and having, a route through, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great point. So what about at like an organizational level? Like, is there cases that any of you can think of where you'd say an org isn't ready to make that leap? I guess that's where you'd call, a services company like Nearform to help your organization prepare for that. But is there cases when in your experience, you've gone into an organization and say, you know what, you're not ready for this transition?
I guess one of the challenges with introducing this, I guess, is, it's that technical change. It's the change in technologies, and businesses might have native app teams. What we tend to see within businesses is that they have sort of siloed mobile teams. So you'll have the iOS team, the Android team, and they might work across multiple apps and develop all features and become kind of like can actually slow delivery because they become sort of a core dependency of multiple different products or multiple different lines of business. I guess trying to move people along from, you're using native tools, you're using native languages, to this is a cross-platform approach, but also this is a cross-platform approach that might enable other people to get involved in mobile development and kind of democratize it a bit. We can come up against some people friction there. I guess the way that we would approach that is trying to help with training, making sure that what we're doing is kind of best in class. So it's not just about here's a new language or here's a new framework. It's about, well, let's rethink how we do CI/CD. Let's rethink how we do testing. It's about developer experience as much as it is about this is a new tool. So kind of coming in and helping the teams and empowering them to deliver apps more quickly in a better way. That tends to get people on side more so than going in and saying, here's a new language and a framework, it's going to make everything better, because it won't in isolation. In reality, you're going to have to put in place a lot of other measures to empower the devs to get it right. So I guess that's one element of it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that conversation starts on day one. You start having a meaningful objective call with, the C-suite or whoever it is that's the stakeholder for change. it's really understanding what they're trying to get as an outcome. If it's they just think it'll get better because there's new technology, or like actually that's not going to solve your problems, right? You have to take, native is not a problem. Cross-platform doesn't bring, isn't going to solve all your problems overnight. If they're not looking to cost save, if they've not got, you have to kind of really get into what are you trying to get out of this investment into technology, because it's not cheap, right? You have to invest a lot up front to get, again, the tooling in place, the frameworking in place, the architecture in place to then, deliver. So most companies are looking to, the issues we typically see are, like maybe it's cost saving, maybe it's that they want to build many apps and they want to build a framework that allows them to do many apps, kind of white labeling or something. Maybe what's typical to see is you have an iOS team and an Android team, and guess what? One of those teams is going to be better than the other. I've never not seen it. And usually that means you get disparity. One team's always lagging 6 months behind that team or whatever it might be. And actually, as a CTO, you're looking to kind of, or even like a senior product person, you want to align your product. So yeah, a lot of it's a tough conversation to have, as Matt alludes to. If you've got, you're invested heavily in native and you've got possibly 50 people, maybe, spread across your enterprise company that are into native, then, you need to kind of be really sure that the outcomes you're trying to drive align with the strategic piece. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes actually they're doing that naive view of, we think this is going to solve our problems. No, it won't. You actually have engineering culture issues, you have hiring issues. Your issue is not the technology. So yeah, it's just about having a very, very honest, open conversation on day one to really understand what the outcomes are they're trying to drive, and to see if that's a technology problem or is that an engineering problem.
Oh, absolutely love that. I feel like that's where Nearform shines, right? So we've done all those projects, we've seen all those pain points, and when we come in and we start a new project, like those are the pointed questions we're going to ask right from the beginning, right? Like, are you used to doing silo development? Are you ready to tear down some of the silos or not? And yeah, all those points that you brought up, I feel like that's really great. Well, I think it's the perfect time to kind of open this up to some questions. For everyone watching the live stream, if you do have a question, feel free, it's not too late, feel free to go ahead and type that into the Q&A section on Zoom, and we'll try to get to it. We just have 5 minutes left. We do have a question, and the question is, how easy or hard is it to get existing teams to move from existing technologies such as Angular to something cross-platform? So I think we touched on that a little bit, but does anyone want to take a stab at that question?
It's possible. It's always the case. I think Jacob said this right back at the start. The tech is sort of fundamentally easy. The people is always hard. And I think in our experience, you will get the can-do attitude, people who are happy to upskill, happy to change tack. They're interested in what's coming down the road. They're interested in cross-platform. They're up for the challenge. And then you'll just get people that just hate change, right? And again, that goes back to those pointy questions that you have to have. And it's like, if you're going to go and embark on this mission, where's your engineering team at? Are you being open with them about this change? Are they on board with the change? Look, it's in the corporate world, it can be, hey, load of people are going to get made redundant. We're opting to completely change tack. And I guess our point of view is typically to try and avoid that. What you want to do is bring your good people on that journey. I think as Matt alluded to, we have all of our upskilling courses and stuff. It's a hard thing to get started on, right? And I think that's the thing, going back to that day one exercise where you're asking those hard questions and putting somebody in a sticky position. And if they haven't got the answers to those, then they're not ready to start, right? So, and if they've got the answers to those and they know how they're going to strategically approach it, and obviously that openness, that open culture and bringing people along the ride, you'll never keep everyone happy. Of course you won't. You're going to have your die-hard native coders who are not interested in coming on that cross-platform journey. That's just inevitable. Like, you can't have a team of even probably 10 without upsetting one person, right? But I think, that goes back, as I say, day one questions around, are you willing to deal with those issues when they come up? Are you being open about it? Because there's no point in being secretive, and just again that approach to sort of launching a project like this.
I guess I would add to that as well is kind of keep it keep coming back to outcomes, right? Why are we doing this? Where are we trying to get to? Business outcomes, user-facing outcomes, right? We want to create a slick cross-platform experience, and this is what it's going to get for the business. And bringing the team along on that journey, or teams along on that journey. I think the worst thing that you could probably do is stipulate this from up high, and we're making this change, and it's completely a technical change and nothing else, right? You almost want that nice bigger picture that I don't know, blue sky, where you want to get to, right? And you've got to keep that in mind at all times as you make the change.
That's a great point. Matt, do you have anything to add on that question?
No, I guess it's just much easier to do it if you have a partner, if you have that team or that experience that you can bring in externally that has done this before, that can provide the support to your team, because asking a team to start from scratch, can you learn this new technology, new approach, re-architect, can be quite overwhelming. But having a partner in a consultancy or an advisory form can really make that a much easier transition as well, in whatever form, whether it's advisory, whether it's implementation and augmentation, whatever form, it definitely has helped our clients move a lot more quickly.
Ooh, I feel like that's a really important point. It's that return on investment, right? Is if you invest in that partner from the beginning, like you're going to get so much more out of the results in the end. So we are just about out of time. I want to thank everyone who came to see this the live stream for the webinar. Everyone here on the team, we're always happy to chat. If you have any questions about cross-platform application development, React Native, just weird code subjects in general, I'm sure we'd all entertain all those questions. Feel free to reach out to any of us. The social networks, LinkedIn is an easy place to find any of us. Look up Nearform on LinkedIn. Also, be happy to do that. Keep an eye out for the next webinar. Hopefully, we'll have another interesting topic coming soon. I don't know what that is yet, but I know there'll be something else interesting coming soon. So keep an eye out for that. And LinkedIn is usually the easiest place to find. Reach out to anyone at Nearform. More than happy to talk to you about any of these subjects. I want to thank all the panelists also for being here and providing your expertise. I feel like this was a really interesting subject. So I think we're going to call it a day there. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Cody.